Namaskar and good afternoon. I think at the outset, my gratitude to Business World for getting all of us here. One stage, one platform, and we've got a lovely set of audience. The previous panel was quite engaging. We've had some out-of-syllabus questions, so I'll make sure that I don't go out of syllabus. Some points that we all need to keep in mind. The topic at hand, each one of us is aware of, but there are some numbers that I would like to quote, and why I quote these numbers is they get you a perspective. I'm the odd man out in this panel. I represent UIDAI, so the privilege is to moderate, and I'll do my best to moderate the panel. MSMEs form the backbone of India. There are around about 6.3 crore MSME entities which are existing as of now. Of this, they are the second largest employment providers in the ecosystem, that is after agriculture, constitute 30% of the GDP. These numbers are more or less known to you. But there are certain gaps that exist, which are with regards to policy, the frameworks, the approach in terms of how can we get the MSME sector to comply to the guidelines, and how can these compliances by regulators or by the government be simplified. Now with this as a preamble, Nirupama, I'll come to you for the session opener. So we've got, like I mentioned, 6.3 crore MSMEs, around about 15 to 20% are actually formally registered. And from here I take the cue that, in terms of public policy, what do you feel needs to change in tier 2 and tier 3 cities for ensuring that MSMEs get the right impetus?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So it's interesting, right? I think one of the first problems that we face as a country is our data on MSME business is still lacking, in my opinion. So you quoted the 6.23, which is a figure that's been kind of floating around since 2011. But your Udyam registration as of December itself shows about 7.28 crores. So there is, and that's only a small percentage of probably those that are registered. So I think the starting point, whether it's tier 1, tier 2 or tier 3, I think we need better data collection tools, and we need better data for better policy, always. Specifically, and that's a very broad point that I'd like to begin with. But very specifically, if we were to look at tier 2 and tier 3, I think one of the biggest challenges, at least with my interaction with many of the MSMEs from there, has been access to information itself. So there is two. There is either an information overload, which means there's a lot of bombardment, or there is very limited access to the information. So to kind of put it together, access to the right kind of information at the right time has also been a bit of a challenge. I know there have been quite a few initiatives where there are district centers that have opened up, where there is a lot of hand-holding that is expected to be provided. I'm still not very sure how successful they've been. Not to say that they haven't, but whether they have been as successful as envisaged, because you're seeing more and more businesses coming from tier 2, tier 3 cities. And therefore, the information overload also needs to be streamlined, and it has to be balanced with the lack of information. So I think this would be one of the biggest challenges that MSMEs face today. And I think this is one big policy question that we need to grapple with and we need to address. I'll stop here for now. Thanks.
Okay. So I think key points, correct data, right amount of impetus, and a little bit of accountability of what's happening in the ecosystem, if I can summarize it correctly. So Gurjodhpal, coming to you, we are all aware that UPI transactions crossed around about 14 billion a month back. And in the last panel, we were discussing about the use cases of why ONDC came up and how MSMEs can leverage such initiatives. So there's always this dilemma that is DPI being rightly exploited or leveraged by the MSME sector? So your views on it.
So, it's a really good question. I would just start with a bit of background about what we do. So we work with the micro, part of MSME ecosystem. We are a company, we started out in the UK. There we have around 14% market share in this segment. In India, we've been in business for around 3 years, and we have around 1 million members on the platform. So, I believe DPI has given a really good push to, bringing a very large, what we would call informal, sector to the, formal part of the economy. Like, she mentioned, if you just look at the data, right, different surveys, different data points say 65 to 70 odd million, micro and small businesses in India. If you look globally, right, as a percentage of population, this number is around 10% of any market. And India being so, entrepreneurial, we would expect it to be at around 8-10%. So our own guesstimate is that, there are this missing 70 odd million. So 140 million should be the number of micro and small businesses in India. Now with DPI, I think we've come a long way, and then, there are other things which could further help. But what we have been able to accomplish is, of course, with anybody who's getting formalized is moving out of the cash thing and has a push to run business digitally and collecting payments digitally with this entire UPI flywheel going in. I think that's pushed a lot to formalization. Then along with that, I think GST has been really great. Any small business, right, can take these input-output credits, etc. With the way this system works, it's actually positive, cash flow for that business. Then third, Udyam, and with ability to share data through account aggregation, etc. But Udyam has given this access to formal credit. I think that was the second biggest reason that we see for any small businesses which is conducting business in cash to formalize. So ability to collect payments digitally, UPI, and access to formal credit. So I think all these are seeing really good positive impact. I think one piece which would, we are moving towards that, but which would really help even the ecosystem to bring a lot more to these businesses is that how do we, connect this stack and essentially, bring verification, KYC, access to the same level as individual, right? For businesses, there are proprietors, directors, they today have their PAN Aadhars, there is business PAN, there is Udyam. So, government is investing a lot in infra, but it will give another level of boost once all these systems, they're speaking to each other, and we as businesses in real time are able to authenticate people and bring, credit, bring payments, or bring generally formalization and digitization to these businesses.
So, if I may add to it, it's the right time for the institutional KYC setup to come up as a stack for the MSME sector, so that businesses can leverage it. And I'm talking from the perspective of Aadhaar, definitely at a personal level. So something which can act as a unique identifier and a verifier for the sector itself, I think is going to pay rich dividends. So Sailesh, Gurjodhpal touched on a very subtle point with regards to the credit gap. And, there's a credit gap which, again, if you quote numbers between 20 to 25 lakh crores, which exists within the sector, my numbers may be 5-10% off the mark. This requires some amount of, innovative solutions to bring forward for kind of addressing this issue. So what are the points that you would look at and the solutions that you would suggest?
Yeah, good afternoon BW for having me here, and thanks. See, in terms of credit perspective, the requirement with the number which comes out, in fact, MSME, if you see, it's a very diverse in itself, small, medium, and we basketed it together. So that's the biggest challenge which I feel, in fact. That's why there are n number of players who are catering, right from the institutional players like public sector bank, private sector banks, then players like Tide, FinTech, and NBFCs. Many players are there catering to their kind of segments. If you see the growth in MSME, and as we know, the MSME and the entire segment is the mainstay of our economy. And that has been giving maximum credit growth in last 5 years. In fact, it has almost doubled in last 4 years from 20 lakhs crores to today. We must be in 40 to 42 lakhs crore of credit which we have gone to the MSME sectors, which is growing almost at a 20%. Unlike large corporate, which is growing very less. So definitely innovations is happening, but is it adequate? And the sector is so diverse that one type of innovation which my fellow panel member also said in terms of KYC or others, are these adequate or not adequate, or we need to work on differently. So like at EXIM Bank, in fact, we also our majority of exposure has been on the large corporate. But few years back, in fact, we also realized we need to do certain intervention in the emerging corporates, which we are, we are not there in the micro or small, but we wanted to make changes in the emerging corporates, wherein what kind of changes, which innovative products which we can bring in. So we brought out the product we call it a Ubharte Sitare program, wherein we blended, in fact, the requirement of the, these emerging corporates as not only the lending, debt, but we brought in equity as well in that. So the blended exercise, because many a times like emerging corporates and startups for that matter, in fact, their balance sheet doesn't allow them to borrow. So we can look at, in terms of supporting by way of equity. We brought in some technical assistance program as well, wherein we see that if they needed some, the grant element also, that also we can bond. So it's a wholesome kind of, we see the, the journey of the corporates in terms of under this program, that, seeing the whole perspective, wherever they require any help, we are there to come. So once we launched this program 3 years back, in fact, till now we have supported more than 100, these are all MSMEs only, in fact, emerging corporates. Then we brought out other, program like we call it trade assistance program, wherein for the exporters, since we deal primarily with the exporters, so I will talk about the innovations which we brought out in the this segment. So we tied up with the many, developing or underdeveloped various countries' banks, and we gave lines to them so that our exporters, where those, the letters of credit issued by those banks earlier were not being accepted by the, our Indian banks. Now we stand by guarantee to those LCs, and now the Indian banks accepts those. With this kind of, the support, we additionally, in fact, we did more than 2,000 transactions. We supported more than almost $6 billion export, which otherwise would not have happened. In terms of, as Nirupama madam said, information, information gap is always there in terms of, So we work very closely with DGFT. We used to have a, e-Mitra portal. We clubbed it with, you must have heard, Trade E-Connect, which DGFT has launched. We worked with them, DGFT, very closely to build that whole ecosystem, in fact. And that is launched now, where the information, all the SMEs, on trade side and export side, which sector, what tariff in different countries, on dynamic basis, which is available. It's gradually needs to be propagated, in fact, and awareness has to be created, which our job is, which we are doing. So these are the innovations which we are looking at. In fact, we continue to do that, and we're looking forward to, engage in that, and look forward, other entities also to look at those kind of innovations.
So I think in addition to what you're doing, the district cooperative banks are also playing a major role now. There's a lot of emphasis from the institutional setup to digitize the digital cooperative banks and make them mediums of direct, providing direct access to credit at the district level. Satish, I come to you. The previous panel we had this talk about artificial intelligence, and generally any discussion that you have now which has worth its salt, you always have that buzzword of digitization, and you would want to get in, IoT into it, you would want to get blockchain into it, but the harsh reality is that the sector itself has around about 23% utilization in terms of any digital tool. So with this as a backdrop, how do you visualize that are these buzzwords the key enablers who will enhance productivity, and how can we leverage them?
Great. I think that's a great segment to have. I'm now talking of, let me bring the audience and the panelists to a segment which is not even SMB, which is micro SMBs or self-entrepreneurs. A week back, I was traveling to Jim Corbett, around 200 kilometers out of Delhi. I stopped on a FASTag center. And here is a boy, I started chatting with him. He was studying in 12th standard. He comes there for 2-3 hours, does his job, earns something, and go home, studies. The true digital warriors of Bharat. And what he did was amazing. Within 2.5 minutes flat, he solved my problem of existing FASTag, topped it up, linked it with my car, and he was happily going away. That is the adoption which is already happening at grassroots level. The beauty is when, let's say, this digital adoption started at top in terms of the large corporates, now the next gen of India is actually adopting digital because they are digital native. They have already started their life with 4G, they have started their life with a smartphone, they started with UPI inbuilt into majority of these applications, and hence the digital adoption is happening at much faster pace than what we think. Let me give an example. We deal with the segment which is drivers. We thought, very much like many of us in this room will think, that these drivers are not on Instagram. You will be surprised, 70% of the drivers are Instagram users every day. Right. So that is the adoption level which is already happening. You would have seen now in the normal life when you try to, let's say, give some cash to a vegetable vendor, he generally denies, and thanks to all the UPI and UID, sir, that he says, sir, UPI kar do, right? That's the adoption level which is already happening. Now coming to AI ML, you asked about it. The beauty is these are good buzzwords in the back door, but we are able to apply it to the use of the SMBs, which is the dealers and the drivers. They don't understand the AI of AI and M of ML, but at least you can provide them the applications which they can use. And that's precisely what we do. I will give you just quick one example that for the driver in the EV segment, battery is the biggest asset, right? If it does not run properly, he stops running, and it means it impacts his income. So what we did using AI and ML in the back is, can I predict how many kilometers this battery will run with the current charge this driver is? Can I alert him that please go and charge in the nearest station? Where is the nearest station? And not only that, can I even predict this battery may potentially fail in next 15 days if you don't bring it to service center and proactively get it repaired. So that is the use of AI, ML, and ultimately the digital adoption.
I think perfect. Digitization is not about, me worried about the word digitization, but what can I access through my mobile, which makes it easier for me to do business or conduct or do my day-to-day chores. I think that would be the simplest way of putting it, with no documentation involved in between in terms of the physical documentation. So Sanjay, all quiet on your front, and I need to come to you. There's been a lot of talk about, you can say that there is a requirement of sustainability, there's a requirement of affordability, and these are the two paradigms that the MSME sector always has to balance out. So your views on it?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I come from MSME, and I started this journey about 20 years back, and I'm still struggling with this. I think we have overdose of information. Now with ChatGPT, everything is instant. But the more you dive into it, the more confused you become. So we work in our business with, say, Coca-Cola and Pepsi and all of these global companies who insist on ESG certification. As a MSME, the challenge is if you do it, A, the cost is humongous. B, you don't know where to go, because it's like your own organization will not have a very competent people who can pursue those things and get it done. if you don't do it, you lose business. So personally speaking, I feel that, and this is my belief, and in fact, I was a couple of months back, I was having a meeting with HSBC because they are our bankers, and they asked me, Sanjay, how can we help? I said, the biggest challenge we face is knowledge sharing. Because subject matter experts in MSME is largely not there. You are probably, if you are the owner or the director, you probably know more than others. Unlike in a large corporate, and you can't really go to McKinsey or Bain for this thing, you can't afford them. So coming back to our ESG, I think there are two things which as a MSME we practice. One is the, I call it PACE, which is use a practical, whatever you can reduce, so optimize your resources, adjust to the environment, whatever are the things like in our system. Common thing people talk about is what refrigerant you use. We come from refrigeration. So you adopt to new technology and all that. Bring more efficiency. However, what actually will help us, and like you have done so much in Aadhaar and other things like GST is very simplified and it is really helping us. So if government can create a portal where you have listed partners, we're not saying make it free, but somebody has to subsidize. If I have to export, they'll insist on ESG. And if we have to insist on ESG, either I will not export or I can't afford, so I'll lose a lot of money. And if I pursue that, and if I don't get the order, then I'm always feeling, oh, how will I afford this? So if government can do something, the right example is like you have those empanelment of all the hospitals and insurance where they have fixed the rates. So you go for a cataract operation, the insurance guy knows, okay, I'll get 30,000 bucks or whatever. So if I choose those vendors who are validated, which are globally accepted, because currently I don't know if I go for a ISO, you can't actually differentiate between a right and a wrong. So if there are empaneled vendors, there are rates are fixed by government, and government can choose that, okay, if you're going for this and you are going for export and so far you do it, like we have something called EPCG for big organization. They used to get a custom duty waiver which you can comp off over a 5-year period. I don't mind going for it. So government has to work as a facilitator if they really want to see MSME getting into overdrive mode on export business. The next thing definitely will also be creating awareness platform, which are like conferences which take care of deeper knowledge, not a surface level knowledge. It's good to know, okay, we are talking about environment, sustainability, but a deeper. How do you achieve that? How do you pursue that? I think those are the things which are very critical from MSME perspective. And that is what we are looking at.
So probably standardization and fixing bands would make it easier for anybody to kind of decide, and you will have that you'll have an e-commerce platform which I can access for the services that I want to take. The simplest way that I can put it. Nirupama, coming to you, ESG was something that has been close to your heart. So your views on it. And Gurjodhpal, I'll come back to you for a surprise one out of the box.
So ESG is always very tricky. Even if you look at its current parameters, etc., and even at, it's mandatory for your top, I think 1,000 listed companies as of now, not been mandated by regulator for anybody else, but the value chain effect will be there. But anyone who's been reading on ESG will also tell you that standardization is never really the key, because you cannot, compare, refrigerant business with, let's say, an MSME which is in services. Now, clearly, on the ESG scale, they're going to be far more red than anybody else. So the standardization, that's the problem currently the larger companies are also running into, where you're judging a power company's ESG. The metrics are the same as judging, let's say, an IT company or a consultancy. I mean, it's never the same. And if you're going to make lending and lending decisions on that, credit decisions based on ESG, then certain sectors are going to be very adversely affected. But the thing is that ESG today is a reality. Even if it is not made a regulatory must, there is demand side, but basically from consumers themselves or from the businesses that you're dealing with, which is what you were saying. So what's the way to do it? Because certification ultimately comes from an audit kind of company that provides it. You do have some of them doing that. I think the conversation for ESG and MSME has to be a far more nuanced and deeper conversation, which today isn't happening. It's still more surface level where everyone's talking about ESG, it's important. It's more of a buzzword than anything that is implementable in that sense. Very simply put, I think any audit, and this I believe the company should be able to do by themselves, is to see or create a baseline for themselves. Like for example, you know that this is the coolant I'm using. You may not be able to, calculate what the carbon footprint is on a technical level, but common sense says, okay, if I'm using this, and as experts in your sector, you know where the problems are. It's about lowering what you can. Something as simple. Very many MSMEs ask me, what can I do? I say something as simple as, paper waste that is generated, recycle it. Use double-side printing instead of single-side. Use one-sided paper. Try and do away with as much plastic as you can. Very small baby steps, because with ESG adoption, it's not always a bigger, larger things also. Particularly in the context of MSMEs, the smaller things that you can do, the differences will itself add up, I think, quite well. The G probably is the easiest for MSMEs and where most of them also have trouble. G is the governance bit. So where governance is required, I think that's a very, very important aspect, where you have a proper board structure, where you have your governance principles in place. And I think this falls on the head of the MSME, as in, whether it's the proprietor or the CEO or the operations person. And that's something that you can very, very easily espouse. The S, again, is something you could also look at as an MSME. The S becomes social, which means what are you doing? So you may not be required to do CSR per se, but what is the social initiative that you are doing? How engaged? And social here is not just with the outside community. Being engaged socially is also with your own employees. How well are you engaged with them? How well are you taking care of their requirements in that sense? So that becomes the S. So the point is, I think for MSMEs and ESG, it's not the big things. I think it's very small bits that are there. And for that, I think what's required is for MSMEs to actually understand what the E and the S and the G mean in the context of their size and their business. So S need not be grand gestures of, taking up for reforestation in areas, which works for big corporates. But S can be making sure that all the people in your organization have clean washrooms to go to, that there are separate washrooms for men and women. Or it can be a question of saying, okay, let me make sure that you're well taken care of in any other way. So I think these small steps itself attribute. And because you don't have metrics saying what is E, what is S, and what is G currently for MSMEs, these things will also work in your favor. What is ESG at the bottom line? Saying that you are running your business in an environmentally friendly manner with good governance and being socially conscious. And I think it's up to us and for businesses at this stage to see what those look like before the regulations come in. And I think that's the important aspect to keep in mind. And I would probably pursue this in this direction rather than outright say, get me, because the government idea, while it's a great idea, is going to take long. Going back to the KYC, and sorry, I'm just taking a minute longer, where you're looking at, we have had unified KYC in this country now for, I think, almost a decade. And it really means nothing. Even today, if I go to a bank account and open my KYC number, is of absolutely no use. I have to do the process again and again and again every single place I go. So I'm incredibly skeptical of any kind of unified, KYC kind of business that comes, because it's been there, they've done it, and it's been absolutely, forgive me, but useless. So I don't see how they're going to do this for an MSME sector, because I think the point of interface between any of this and even your ESG, it's the cost of compliance also. MSMEs are already complaining about the cost of compliance and the increasing cost of compliance. Even if, because at the end of the day, digitization and digitalization may bring in convenience, but there is also a cost to it. And somewhere that needs to be managed. So if you're going to throw an additional ESG requirement on them, it's going to happen, but at least do it in a way where they can absorb the costs at a very reasonable rate to begin with, instead of kind of making it exorbitant where they'd rather say, I'll close my business, or I'd rather not register, and you move businesses back into the unorganized space. So I think that's why we need to rethink of our strategy of ESG for MSMEs particularly. Start with baby steps, start with everyday processes that you can clean up, do better, and then move to the bigger ones, because that's, the ethos will then build into the company as well. And I think that's how we'll have to begin. Thanks.
So, same template doesn't fit all. Baby steps are essential. I think I'll take it to the audience. There are a lot of steps that each one have taken our respective organizations, and one of those old initiatives that started in 2015 was not to use SUP. Any one of you who can tell me the full form of the word, the acronym that I used? And this was an institutional process, you know. It came in with all the Swachhta Abhiyans and everything. SUP was a target given to every entity, whether government or non-government. Anyone, any takers? I'm just trying to generate some interest. So there was...
Ladies and gentlemen, I believe the floor is now open for questions and
No,
answers.
the forum is not open for questions, but I'm just trying to generate some interest. Yes. Excellent. So, can you take your mind back to a 10-year journey from where you were to where you are, and you're still picking up those bottles and still trashing them, and still the airlines are serving them to you, still the railways are serving them to you? So, the effort, the directions, the guidelines, everything gets legislated. The adoption part is with you and me, nobody else. That's the most simple example that I was trying to bring forward. So, Gurjodhpal, I'll come to you. Nirupama touched a very, touchy nerve, compliance. It's a very touchy topic, and that's why I said out of the box. So, there's always this dilemma that compliance is something that I should be worried about. It's going to, set me back by a couple of years, or set me back by a couple of processes and timelines. I am expected to get into certain conflicts which are going to force certain retrospective penalties on me. So how would you look at compliances?
Well, I think the way we have progressed in the ecosystem, let's just take GST and, prior to this, the sales tax and all that regime, right? But you look at GST, it essentially, for a very small business, it does not come as a burden, but rather, a way of transparency, helps them, have some cash flow saved, because all their lives, they were always paying some tax on whatever input they have. Even imagine a chai shop, right? Whatever they are buying, the GST is included in the price, right? Now, how do you get credit for it? So compliance does not always have to be a stick. I think the way we have approached it as an ecosystem, there is a lot of carrot as well. Similarly, Udyam or accepting payments digitally, right? Now with the UPI flywheel, I think the change which has happened is it's almost impossible to conduct or think of conducting your business in cash. There is no change. You would, have to have a QR and start accepting payments. Otherwise, the business stands to lose the customer. Now, all these are in a very positive direction, and it gives someone, business identity, access to formal credit, convenience of running business, etc. And once you have tasted a step in this direction, like people do move in the direction of compliance. But what we need to solve for is convenience of it. It is more than from a governance standpoint or a fear. It's more than fear. It is the amount of effort and time this takes. Because imagine a small business, single person business, the person is always busy. Today, to ensure that they do all the compliance, they have to sit with the accountant, they have to run from here to there, etc. You take out 1 or 2 working days from the month. He's already catching up, and then slowly these go below. So if the more we digitize it, the more convenience we bring to it, I think that will enable us to have more governance in micro businesses.
Okay. So, Satish, you brought forward this point with regards to drivers, and anybody who's dealing with manpower at scale is aware that the labor laws have changed. It's a touchy point right now. 40% of the requirement for compliance originates from the labor laws. So I will come to you first and then to Sanjay. Your views on it. It's an out-of-the-box question.
I think labor laws as of today, what is applicable in our case is basically the employees which we are dealing with, right? But perhaps you are extending that discussion to even to the last mile drivers, which are ultimately some form or the other the labor. I will say that they are micro entrepreneurs in their own space. At least I am not aware of anything which right now in terms of any changes which really brings any change in the labor laws which is applicable to these particular last mile drivers. But love to learn if there is one.
Okay. Sanjay, your viewpoint on it? There was a lot of talk, front page news on the labor laws.
In our industry, there has been some changes in terms of how because like earlier, particularly with regard to ESI, so we used to cover all of them under medical insurance and medical allowances and all, and because they were out of ESI. Now they're all, because now the total gross, all of that is getting calculated, so they will also get covered under ESI. Now, because you are already giving them a money, taking it back becomes difficult, and suddenly ESI is also getting deducted from their component, which means there is a little reduction in their take home. So not only you got to pay for your contribution, you got to compensate for his deduction and also continue paying him what you were paying. And they're not very happy going to ESI because they feel ESI is like, yahan to kuch hoga nahi or whatever else. So that's the only thing. Otherwise, I think it's pretty straight.
Okay. So, yeah, please, Nirupama. And Sailesh, I'll come to you after this.
Just very quickly. So I think, with the labor code changes that you've seen, and this has been something which was a problem from the beginning, where there was a mandatory requirement for MSMEs or any businesses to have a canteen if your total number of employees went this way. And these were all actually very serious concerns that came out even then. For one, there is a lack of space. So you were looking at different ways to maybe do that through food coupons and things like that. But currently, I think the biggest changes is, and I'm glad you mentioned this, is also in terms of what they're doing with the gig economy. And with MSMEs today, and we still think gig economy is something probably related only to the larger companies, but you will have MSMEs also hiring a lot of gig workers because it does actually lower their own costs. But now with the kind of social code that's come in, where you're expected to also contribute a certain amount to a fund which nobody knows today how it's going to be utilized and what's going to be done with it. But also that some companies like yourselves are already offering insurance products for gig workers and for their employees in maybe a better manner, because obviously the disbursement is better. Now you're putting companies at problem, or with an additional cost. So what is actually working efficiently is probably going to be traded in for a less efficient system. And I think these would be the concerns that will affect even your MSMEs.
Okay, fair point. So Sailesh, in brief, there's always this point which comes up in anything that we do with regards to awareness, and more so from the government's point of view, the awareness of the government initiatives. The sector kind of, again quoting some numbers, has around about 60% awareness of the government schemes, and there are gaps. So how do you feel that this awareness aspect can be brought about and made proactive? We've talked about digitization, we've talked about reaching out to the last person, we've talked about labor laws. So from this viewpoint, how do you look at it?
Yeah, see, this is a very relative term, in fact, awareness. In my opinion, because if you see the government's efforts toward the awareness, creation of awareness and the kind of investment, in fact, they are doing, it's a massive of all the programs. I'll give you examples, in fact, kind of changes which I have seen, to be very frank. Recently, government has launched one, the 1 lakh crore investment that Anusandhan, research fund. And I participated it in Mumbai. And you may not have seen government coming out with the road show. And that was a massive participation. In fact, the whole hall, entire hall was filled with people, and everyone was standing, in fact, in Mumbai, I am telling you. So, see, the awareness has to come from the both side, actually. Awareness is there in terms of, and this is where the digitization effort has also gone in. But obviously, to reach to the last mile, definitely, more and more has to be done. And to make it understand the simpler language, that is where I feel that, many a times the government schemes are not simplified to the extent that a last mile user, would understand it in their language. That is where, because each schemes would have a little subjective language, which, you need to have ask them twice, thrice. So this is where we have to kind of oversimplify, so that they don't have to worry about to go and ask again. So that's where I feel that like if we all can, and we all try in that, in fact, because we also are part of it. In fact, our own program is there. We reach out. In fact, we do the road show. We reach out to the, go to the different city, meet the client also, make them understand. In fact, our own program, which many of the, in fact, what we do differently in terms of creation of awareness, we have created who are the stakeholders, we work very closely with academic institutions as well, which is not our client directly per se, but they, they host these emerging corporates, like incubation centers. So when we launched this program,
excellent,
yeah.
Couldn't have been much more louder.
Yeah. When we launched this program, we reached out to all incubation centers right from IIT, Mumbai, Delhi, where all these startups are housed as their incubatee. That we have this financing program where we offer lending as well as equity support. And that has become a wonderful, in our whole exercise, because we picked up those companies that we supported at the time, and they have, within 3-4 years, those companies are so successful. Some of them have come to IPO, some of them are in the process of IPO. So that kind of, reach, you have to think differently to reach out to your last mile consumers. That's what I would say that.
So fair point. On account of that hard buzzer, I'll put a hard stop to the discussion. And there are some points that I was jotting down while traveling from Mumbai to Delhi yesterday. I thought, let me have, and I'm not the right man to give those points, but over the course of this discussion, they've come around, and I can be corrected. Policy must meet ground reality in everything that we do. We all talk in different forums, but that's the harsh reality. DPI has to be leveraged. We are all using DigiYatra, UPI, etc. But try and get the experience of people in tier 4 and 5, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Technology adoption is a key word, but there are stakes. There is a cost, there is a timeline that has to be kept in mind. And lastly, sustainability has to be embedded in any initiative that we are taking. I hope the panel agrees to it. My gratitude to each one of you for allowing me the liberty to moderate this discussion, and thank you to the audience. In case there are any queries, please feel free to reach out to us when we are down below, and gratitude to Business World for getting us together. Thank you.